Good morning, cozy community members. Let me get my coffee out of here. I treated myself to a store-bought coffee this morning. It has been quite a month, and that is my excuse for not having any new episodes up last week. So at the time of this recording, it is October 2021, and I'm participating in a fun challenge on Instagram called the Topsy Turvy TV Tour, and I'm going to have links below for all the information. But basically, I'm sending Chloe Martin, our sleuth in the Jericho Falls Cozy Mysteries, on a tour of various TV shows. She's being plopped right in the middle of them, and yes, of course, she's solving a mystery. Sort of, because that's a lot of writing. It's a real challenge to do a new scene and a new setting every single day in the month of October. So that's kind of what I've been up to. That's why I've been busy. Two of my good friends, Saffron and Maudie, and also Tracy Brown, are two of the other authors who are hostessing, and so I'm going to leave you some links to some of their things below too. They're great, and you're going to really want to check out what they're up to. But in the meantime, we did 2 chapters last episode. We're going to do 2 chapters this episode, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this very, very windy day in my neck of the woods won't ruin my recording. So can we just pretend that if you hear some whooshing wind, it's going to add to the ambiance of our cozy mystery, okay? All right. So today we're going to get to the next 2 chapters, which will be 21 and 22. But if you remember, last episode or last chapter we were on was that Chloe and Grandma had talked about the fact that the last she knew of Art after Nancy died, and Art stayed in Lakeview and he was working at an Italian restaurant. But Grandma, she can't remember what it was called. And Chloe decides she should go there and see if anyone remembers him and if she can learn anything about him there. So we're going to start with chapter 21, Someone Was Inside. I didn't have any time to lose if I was going to get to Lakeview before the cops. I threw a few necessities into my backpack and gave the animals and Grandma hugs goodbye. I was relieved to finally have a plan. I wasn't sure how I would find the restaurant with the Italian name once I got there, but I'd do a web search and check with locals. It couldn't be too hard, right? My real fear was that the restaurant had gone out of business or sold. If that was the case, it would be a long shot to find anyone who had known Art in Lakeview. I stopped short. Mariah might know the name of the restaurant. Art must have completed a work history on his job application. Maybe she'd help me with this bit of information and save a lot of precious time. I took the front steps 2 at a time and realized Grandma had blocked me in with her Subaru. My truck also needed gas if I was going to make it the 30-odd miles to Lakeview. I hurried back inside for Grandma's keys and permission to take her car. She shooed me out the door with a kiss on the cheek. "Be careful, dear," she said. The giant menagerie of baubles jingled in my hand. I thought of Chief Garner and me stuck together with its wires and beads. This made me smile. But I brushed away the thought of him. Stop it, Chloe. He had a wife or a girlfriend. Not to mention, he was investigating my grandma for murder. As I drove through town, I spotted a large yellow canopy being assembled on the front lawn of City Hall for the upcoming Founders' Day festivities. If I had my way, all of this would be behind me and I'd be back in Idaho before the celebration hit. I wasn't in the mood for hobnobbing with all the locals. But as my problems mounted, a quick departure seemed unlikely. Business owners swept the boardwalk in front of their shops, tourists meandered, and smiles abounded down Main Street. A man dressed in chaps, spurs, and a 10-gallon hat handed out coupons for the Old West Photo Gallery at the end of Main Street. Families would don period clothing and sit for black and white photos taken with an antique camera. It was difficult to believe that somewhere in this small, quaint tourist town, a murderer was lurking. It was 11:30 when I arrived at the Opera House. I hoped that Mariah would help me, or I would have to turn around and hit the road for Lakeview, winging it. No other cars were parked out front, but a heavy steel door at the side of the building stood open. Someone was inside. Before I could unhook my seatbelt and get out of the car, Mariah stepped through the open door. "Chloe? Oh, hi. I heard a car pull up, but didn't expect it to be you." I shut the car door and went to meet her. She wore dark jeans and a flannel shirt knotted at the waist. As we said hellos in the gravel parking area, another person came out of the door. It was Malcolm Griggs. He glanced in our direction and then disappeared around the back of the building. Maybe Mariah had hired him as Art's replacement just as he wanted. At some point, I wanted to talk with him too, but not until I armed myself with more information on Art's past. "I suppose I didn't expect to be back here so soon either," I smiled, "but I'm hoping you can help me with something." Mariah tilted her head, puzzled. I swallowed and prepared for what I was about to admit. "The truth is, the police suspect that my grandma killed Art." She widened her eyes and began shaking her head. "Why would they think that? Art and Lily were so sweet together." Her words were like applying salve to an open wound. I felt a wave of relief at once. "It's so good to hear you say that. I agree, but there's evidence that places her in a bad light. I need to find out who's really behind Art's murder to save her. Would you help me?" I sensed a tension come over Mariah. "Well, no one from the Opera House was involved, if that's what you mean. I would never hire someone violent." "What about Malcolm?" "I'm not accusing anyone. In fact, I'm wondering if you have any details about Art's life before he came to Jericho Falls." "Why?" I paused for a moment, watching the toe of my Converse tennis shoe drag through the gravel. Could I trust her? I think his past may have caught up with him. Mariah watched me, waiting to see if I'd say more. When I stayed quiet, she said, "I wish I could help you and Lily, but I don't know anything about Art's past." "What about his job application or resume?" "I hired him on the spot after one interview. I didn't need anything else to know he was exactly what I was looking for." "So you don't have a work history from him?" She shrugged. "I can check my files to make sure." "Thanks. I'd appreciate that." I followed Mariah inside. She heaved the heavy, creaky door closed behind us. "Sorry about that," she said. "I need to get a repairman to fix it, that old thing. The hinges are shot." Mariah asked me to wait in the theater while she checked her records downstairs. I wandered around the room, listening to my footsteps echo on the hardwood floors. I took a seat in the back row. The vintage velvet beneath me felt cool and comfortable. I remembered coming here with Grandma and Grandpa when I was little. We'd see a play or a puppet show. It was magical. It was humbling to think of the thousands of shows that had entertained the townspeople of Jericho Falls in this theater throughout the ages. Musicians, child actors, opera singers, and Shakespeare. Sometimes outlandish events such as a fight between a grizzly bear and a bull were put on stage. But rough-and-tumble miners weren't always easy to please. It is said they might toss gold coins or garbage at the acts, depending on the night. When I opened my eyes, I was drawn to the ticket booth behind me. It was nothing more than a closet-sized room situated between the theater's front doors. Its exterior was a bay window, creating a place to purchase tickets from the outside of the building. The interior door was a Dutch door. The top could be opened separately from the bottom. This was so the ticket person could keep an eye on the show while working. The top of the door was open, so I went over to take a peek inside. The walls of the ticket booth were papered with show posters, some recent, some old. It was like one big scrapbook. In the corner sat a pair of work boots, an old-fashioned walking stick complete with a glass knob handle, and a stack of sports magazines. The magazine on top of the stack had an image of an athlete being awarded a medal. I leaned in for a closer look, but suddenly a loud bang rang out behind me. I whirled around and found Luke. He had dropped an empty metal bucket a few feet away. In his other hand, he carried a mop. My heart pounded and my hands shook. "You scared me," I said. Luke was panting like he had just run up a flight of stairs. "What are you doing?" "I came to talk to Mariah. Where did you come from?" I asked. "I was here all the time. You didn't see me?" he said. "I was cleaning the floor." He held up the mop as proof. "With an empty bucket?" Before I could challenge him, Mariah returned. "Luke, what are you up to?" "More cleaning. Come on, Judge." Luke called his little dog, and they left through the creaky side door. Mariah frowned in his direction, then rolled her eyes. "Is he okay?" I asked. "He seems, I don't know, off." She swatted her hand in the air. "That's Luke for you, always in his own little world." "I just think—" "Don't worry about him," she said, interrupting me. "And I'm sorry, but I didn't find anything to help you. I don't seem to have any information on Art's past." This was my worst fear. Of course Art didn't share any details about his past life in Lakeview. He didn't want Mariah or anyone to find out he had duped Nancy while living there. "Thanks for looking," I told her. "I'm not sure where to go from here, but if I find out anything, I'll let you know." "Thank you, Chloe. Everyone wants to know what happened to Art. I've even heard a crazy theory that there's a local resident on a killing spree." She shivered. "I know it sounds ridiculous, but the town can't afford rumors like that during tourist season." "Well, I'm not an expert," I told Mariah, "but the way he died doesn't seem random. It was personal, like someone had it out for him. I doubt anyone else in town has to worry." "You might be right," she said, "but it's hard to believe that such a charming gentleman was someone who deserved to die." "I'm not sure he was," I said, referring to the charming gentleman part. Chapter 22. Hitchhikers Can't Be Choosers. Now what was I going to do? I had to get a jump on the cops. The only thing I could do was go back to the web search and see how many Italian restaurants were in Lakeview. Maybe one of them would ring a bell with Grandma Lily. I zoomed back to Jericho House as fast as I legally could. I hopped out of the still-running Subaru and made a dash for the house. I had just made it onto the porch when I heard him. "Chloe!" Anthony White was coming up the walk toward Jericho House. He was dressed for work and carried a briefcase. "I came to see you." "What for?" "Oops, that was a little cold." He smiled with a confused look. "You seemed sad yesterday. I wanted to make sure you're okay." "You saw me soon after I'd found my grandmother's boyfriend dead in our flower bed. Of course I was sad." He bit his bottom lip. "Touché." "Thanks for your concern, Anthony, but I'm doing fine." I motioned towards the running car to show that I was about to leave. He continued walking in my direction and met me on the steps. "Where are you off to in such a big hurry?" "I have some things to do for my grandma," I lied. I simultaneously typed into my phone and climbed the front steps. On the little screen, a list of 4 Italian-themed restaurants with Lakeview addresses popped up. "Are you sure you're all right?" Anthony asked. I looked up at him apologetically. "I'm sorry, but I really need to go. Thanks for checking on me." I opened the door to Jericho House and closed it quickly behind me. It was rude, but I wasn't in the mood for Anthony or his stupid development plans today. Grandma was in the library, giving a guided tour. Darn, I wouldn't be able to talk to her after all. Our eyes met, and I gave her a little wave goodbye. Here went nothing. "Hey, mind if I come along on your errands? We should catch up." Anthony was still on the porch. "Maybe some other time." He trailed behind me and then hurried to open the driver's side door of the Subaru for me. "Oh, come on, I'd love to," he said. I hurried to slide behind the wheel and racked my brain for a way out of this. "Shouldn't you be at work?" Anthony chuckled. "I'm in charge of this project. I set my own schedule." He closed the door behind me and jogged around the rear of the car to reach the passenger side. Then the most logical excuse came to me. When he tossed his briefcase on the floorboard and flopped in beside me, I said, "Go hang out with Bree, your fiancée." Anthony gave me a sheepish grin. Sorry, I'm banned from visiting her during the workday because I distract her. Last week, she left Mrs. Randall's hair dye in too long. Now Mrs. R is literally a redhead. I rolled my eyes. You aren't going to leave me alone, are you? He buckled his seatbelt. Nope. I stretched my neck and took a deep breath. You're as irritating as ever. Thanks, Anthony grinned. His dimples showed on his freckled cheeks and his dark eyes gleamed. Anthony jostled around to get into a comfortable position. Whoa, there is no legroom in here, is there? Hitchhikers can't be choosers, I said. We drove in silence for a while. Silence, that is, aside from Anthony flipping through every available radio station and then returning to the one where he started. So where to, Lo? He asked. An odd sensation came over me. No one had called me Lo since the last time I'd been here. It was the nickname Blake had given me. Lakeside, I said. Oh, a little sightseeing? He grinned. Sorta, I mumbled. I wasn't at all pleased about his tagging along, but I couldn't think of how to get rid of him without wasting a lot of time and energy. We drove on for a few more minutes. I stayed intent on the road while Anthony strummed his fingers to the music. This little errand doesn't have anything to do with art, does it? Anthony asked. I pretended not to hear him. Ooh, he said with a mysterious lilt, the silent treatment. He looked out the passenger window and whistled to the song on the radio. That's okay, I'll do all the talking. How about an update on my brother? You're probably interested in knowing what he's been up to all these years. Wrong, I said. Anthony threw his head back and laughed. I knew it. Let's see, where to start. Blake has dated some, but never found that special someone. Really, Anthony? I don't care, I said. Still, I discovered I had started to hold my breath in anticipation. To my dismay, Anthony continued. Blake has done exactly what everyone expected. He had a successful college football career, a summa cum laude graduation, and returned to help operate the political evil of Jericho Falls. Political evil? I asked. You say City Hall, I say political evil. He pretended to balance a scale with his hands. Oh, come on, I said. It benefits you too. It will make it much easier to get the development approved with your brother running the city. Anthony laughed again, sarcastically this time. Hardly. Blake challenges everything that I do and won't listen to my rationale for the development. I doubt he'll ever stop thinking of me as his stupid baby brother. This made me perk up. The petitioner in the park insinuated that the city would rubber stamp the project simply because Blake and Anthony were related. Maybe that wasn't the case after all. What are you smiling about? He asked. I guess I'm glad you're having a hard time getting support for the development, I admitted. We're doing fine, he said. I got the impression that he was trying to convince both of us. He reached down for his briefcase. When he placed it on his lap, I noticed it was monogrammed with A.W. He began to search inside and finally pulled out a document filled with numbers. See, he said, we're almost to our investment goals. The Jericho Falls City Council would be fools not to approve this proposal. What happens if they don't approve it? I asked him. Anthony didn't respond. 1-2 miles went by without him saying a word. I guessed he didn't want to consider what failure in Jericho Falls would mean to his career, and possibly his reputation with his own family. Want to know where we're going? I asked, hoping to get Anthony out of his funk. Anthony nodded with fake annoyance. Yeah. I handed him my phone with the restaurant web search displayed. You hungry, Chloe? I shook my head. I want to find the place Art worked in Lakeview to see if anyone remembers him, but it's going to take some legwork. Why's that? Because I don't know which Italian place he worked at. All Grandma knows is that it sounds like an Italian last name. Not especially helpful. It was Fabiani's, Anthony said matter-of-factly. How do you know that? He shrugged. I can't really remember why, but Art mentioned it to me, that he used to work there. Who would have thought that my unwanted guest would be so useful? I held up my hand for a high five. All right, I'm glad you came with me. He grinned, but his smile quickly faded. I could sense the wheels turning in his head. Art's lived in Jericho Falls for a while now. Do you think his death could be connected to something that far in his past? I'm not sure, I said. You know, he replied, Fabiani's is near the marina. We should park there and walk. I shrugged. Okay. I was happy to agree as long as Anthony stopped asking about Art's background in Lakeview. As we drove closer to the waterfront, traffic became congested. Luckily, we found a great spot near the marina where the sunshine played off the water and the brightly colored sailboats. It was a tight fit, which gave me a chance to display the advantages of this compact car to Anthony. He wasn't convinced. Legroom trumps parking capabilities anytime. Exactly what a tall man would say, I thought. As soon as I switched off the ignition, Anthony was out of the car and walking away. Where are you going? I called. To the water, duh, he said. I sighed and looked at the sky. Perhaps the heavens would aid me in my plight. I came here for a reason, Anthony. Anthony shook his head and came back to my side. He smiled and took my elbow. You cannot come all this way and not enjoy the spectacular views. It's un-American. Un-American? Isn't that a little dramatic? Just look at all these people having fun. He motioned to the crowds around the lake. Some were picnicking, others sailing or swimming in the water. Look how happy they are. I groaned. Would Anthony ever grow up? I dragged my feet for a few steps, but eventually began walking with him. He laughed and patted my back in a brotherly way. I'd been to Lakeview Marina countless times, but it never failed to impress me. When I was small and stayed the summers with Grandma and Grandpa, they would bring me almost every weekend. We'd get ice cream or popcorn and build a sand castle on the beach. Those were some of my happiest memories. I'm pretty sure that's when I became a history buff too, because it was during those outings that they taught me about the background of Jericho Falls and the surrounding area. I learned about the gold rush, the die-hard pioneers that made it happen, and the fascinating folklore surrounding it all. Then, when I got older, Christy would drive us here in her red Volkswagen Bug. We'd lie on the beach in our bikinis, slathered in suntan lotion that smelled like coconuts. That familiar twinge of remorse came over me. What's wrong? Anthony said, looking concerned. I was just thinking about Christy. We used to come here. His brow creased. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, only reminiscing, that's all. I smiled at him. It was unlike me to admit that I was ever thinking about Christy, but Anthony knew her. Anthony knew her too. So few people fit that profile that it felt good to confide in him, even just a little. But it did nothing to dispel the question that hung over me like a storm cloud. Why was he here? The Anthony White I knew always had an agenda. All right, that does it for chapters 21 and 22, and we will see next week what it is that Anthony White has up his sleeve, why he is accompanying Chloe on her trip to Lakeview. I hope you'll join me then. I can't wait to read the next part to you guys. In the meantime, please give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it, and check out the links below for everything else that I've been up to, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.